The transit gates blew open, and something massive bled onto the polished floor. Queen Zarilla of the Valen hit the tiles hard. Her obsidian scales were cracked and smoking. Her shattered wings leaked iridescent blue sap across the blinding white concourse of Kalen 9. No alarms, no help, no mercy. The automated triage bots rolled toward her. They scanned her massive form. They registered her complex political status. A sterile chime echoed through the massive hall. Liability risk exceeds acceptable parameters. Medical intervention denied. The civilized species of the galaxy did not hesitate. A group of Nexari diplomats covered their scent glands and ran toward the transit tubes. The station administrators activated the emergency quarantine shields. Thick glass walls began to slide down from the ceiling. They were locking her in the center of the concourse to die cleanly. They only cared about the stain on the floor. Elias Thorne, a human janitor, watched this for exactly 4 seconds. He grabbed the handle of his sanitation cart. He ran forward and wedged his heavy steel-toed boot under the descending blast door. I'd like to say the station masters learned their lesson that day. They didn't, but the galaxy did. Earlier that cycle, Elias had been leaning against that same cart. He was nursing a cup of synthesized coffee. The dark liquid smelled like battery acid. The station was a hub for the galactic elite. They treated humans like slow-moving furniture. A passing administrator had paused just long enough to drop a data wrapper on the floor. The alien told Elias to make sure his primitive breath did not fog the pristine glass walls. Elias had sighed. He threw the wrapper in the bin. He gripped his mop. It featured a thick steel handle. He was used to the insults. Now Elias shoved his cart deeper into the gap. The blast door's servos whined loudly. The heavy metal tried to crush his boot. He slammed the handle of his mop into the manual override panel. The panel sparked. The door groaned and locked in place. He slipped inside the quarantine zone. He dropped to his knees beside the dying queen. Zarilla hissed. She thrashed her massive tail in blind agony. The heavy appendage smashed into a structural pillar. Chunks of concrete shattered across the tiles. Elias dove forward. He rolled under the falling debris. He came up right next to her. She twisted her massive neck. She bared rows of serrated teeth at him. Her jaws could snap a steel beam in half. She readied herself for a final strike. Back in Texas, Elias used to pull feral bobcats out of storm drains. An oversized lizard with a crown did not scare him. He kept his hands visible. He reached slowly into the bottom bin of his cart. He pulled out a heavy-duty thermal foil blanket. The station used them for fixing frozen pipes. He shook the blanket open. He stepped closer and draped the crinkling silver material over her shivering mass. "Easy, big girl," Elias said. His voice dropped into a steady, low rhythm. "I know it hurts." "I am not going to hurt you." The station's linguistic translators struggled to parse his tone. The raw emotion translated perfectly. Zarilla stopped snapping. She locked her dimming eyes on him. She expected him to attack her. She expected him to flee. She expected him to finish the assassination. Instead, Elias pulled a roll of industrial duct tape from his belt. He grabbed a massive wad of sterile gauze from his supply bin. He leaned right into her strike zone. He pressed the thick gauze hard against the gushing wound on her side. He wrapped the silver tape over the padding. He pulled it tight to create pressure. Her blue sap stained his hands and his gray jumpsuit. The intercom crackled loudly above them. The lead administrator sounded panicked. "Human, janitorial. We are fining you 400 credits for unauthorized fluid absorption. Step away from the biological hazard immediately." Elias ignored the voice. He focused entirely on the queen. Her heavy, horned head drooped toward the floor. Elias slid his arm under her neck. He supported her massive skull. He rested it gently against his grease-stained shoulder so she could breathe easier. The queen felt the undeniable warmth of his body. She realized he was not calculating a political angle. She let out a soft, shuddering purr. Her biolights flickered. The terrified gray illumination shifted into a steady, trusting gold. She yielded her weight to him. The administrators realized Elias was not moving. They panicked. A Valen dying on their concourse was a diplomatic disaster. A human interfering made it worse. They decided to erase the problem. The secondary metal doors slid open. A squad of automated security drones rolled onto the floor. They raised their kinetic stun batons. One drone moved forward to grab Zarilla's broken wing. Elias stepped in front of it. He swung his heavy mop handle. He struck the drone's optic sensor hard. The machine staggered back from the impact. "Step back, human," the lead drone announced. Its mechanical voice carried zero inflection. "We must sterilize the area. You are in violation." Elias looked at the glowing weapons. He looked down at the Queen. Her massive claws had weakly curled into the fabric of his jumpsuit. She had anchored herself to the only kind thing in the entire station. Elias stood up. He held the steel handle like a quarterstaff. He planted his boots firmly on the tiles. "You are going to have to go through me, you shiny toasters," Elias said. The lead drone fired a kinetic pulse. The violent energy cut across the room. The sharp smell of industrial bleach instantly burned away into the harsh tang of ozone. The pulse slammed directly into Elias' left shoulder. The impact fractured his collarbone with a loud crack. Elias grunted in heavy pain. He dropped to one knee. He refused to step aside. He kept his body physically positioned between the drone weapons and the Queen. He braced the steel mop handle against the floor. Zarilla let out a weak cry. She tried to lift her broken wing. She wanted to shield the tiny, fragile creature who was protecting her. Her golden lights pulsed in rapid distress. The drones powered up their main cannons for a lethal strike. The entire concourse shook violently. The heavy exterior airlocks exploded inward. Thick metal doors tore off their hinges and crashed across the floor. Commander Varkater stormed through the smoke. He was a massive, battle-scarred Valen warlord. 30 heavily armed honor guards flanked him. They had tracked their Queen's fading biosignature to a station that despised them. They raised their plasma rifles. They came prepared for a slaughter. Varkater swept his eyes across the room. He saw the cowering administrators behind the glass. He saw the security drones aiming their weapons. Then he looked at the center of the concourse. Varkater froze. His entire vanguard halted behind him. A heavy knot of dread formed in the warlord's chest. For centuries, the Valen taught that humans were primitive, selfish cowards. They believed humans would always run when faced with superior force. But Varkater looked at the human kneeling on the floor. He saw the shattered collarbone. He saw the makeshift foil blanket and the duct tape binding the Queen's wounds. He saw Elias holding a broken cleaning tool, bleeding to form a physical shield over the Valen ruler. The warlord realized his empire was catastrophically wrong about this species. The humans were not cowards. They were something far more dangerous. They were protectors. Varkater stalked forward. His heavy footsteps echoed loudly in the sudden silence. The security drones backed away from him. He stopped directly in front of Elias. The warlord looked down at the duct tape. He looked at the human's broken shoulder. His translator box vibrated with a deep, chest-rattling bass. "Human," Varkater rumbled. "Why did you not flee? We are apex predators. You are prey. Your own station masters abandoned her to die. Why did you stay?" Elias winced. He carefully adjusted his grip on his injured shoulder. He looked up at the giant alien. "I do not know, man. She was bleeding. Where I am from, you do not leave things to die on the floor just because it is not your job." Zarilla shifted her weight. She looked up at her commander. Her biolights flashed a complex sequence of Valen sense speech and light code. She told him exactly what the human had done. She told him about the warmth. She told him about the mop. Varkater widened his eyes in absolute shock. He looked back at Elias. The heavy tension in the room shifted. Varkater reached for his heavy plasma cannon. He powered it down. He dropped it to the floor. He folded his legs. The terrifying warlord bowed his head until his crystalline crest touched the polished tiles right in front of Elias' scuffed work boots. Behind him, all 30 honor guards dropped to their knees in perfect unison. Their weapons clattered loudly against the floor. "You have enacted the aegis of the first scale," Varkater said. His deep voice shook with raw reverence. You bled to shield the crown when the civilized stars turned their backs. The Valen do not forget. The aftermath moved rapidly. The station administrators scrambled over the intercom. The lead administrator walked out of his secure office. He tried to claim he called the medical team. Varkater crossed the room in 2 strides. He grabbed the administrator by his pristine uniform. He lifted the alien entirely off the floor. Varkater demanded the override codes for the executive medical suite. The administrator choked out the numbers. Varkater dropped him. The Vanguard guards locked down the entire sector. Hours later, Elias sat on the edge of a high-end medical bed. A robotic surgeon had set his collarbone. His arm rested in a rigid sling. Varkater stood in the doorway. The warlord formally offered Elias a position as a high lord in the Valen fleet. He promised ships, wealth, and command. Elias shook his head. He gave a tired smile. I appreciate the offer, Commander, but I just fixed a leak. Plus, I think I still owe the station 400 credits for the duct tape. Zarilla entered the room. She was heavily bandaged, but her breathing was stable. She walked up to the bed. She reached out her massive, clawed hand. She tapped a small, perfectly smooth obsidian scale into his palm. It was a royal token. She pressed her forehead gently against his good shoulder. Her lights glowed a steady, warm gold. The galaxy watched the leaked security footage. The species everyone called primitive monsters forced a massive re-evaluation. The Valen fleet stationed warships around the human home world. They dared the elite administrators to complain. The alliance forged in the blood on the concourse floor carried a clear warning. The transit gates remained heavily guarded. The scale sat cold and heavy in Elias' palm. The debt was open.